Welcome to FT Markets. I'm here today to talk about copper, a key commodity for the global economy. This month, copper suddenly fell dramatically and is trading near 5.5-year lows on the London Metal Exchange. Here with me today to talk about this topic is George Cheveley. He's a portfolio manager at Investec Asset Management. Welcome.
Thank you.
So first of all, if you can see from our first chart, the price of copper has fallen a lot this year. And the most dramatic fall happened at about 1 a.m. London time. You know, what's behind this sudden drive in sentiment, do you think?
As usual, there are many factors involved in the current fall in copper price, and one does have to go back to the fundamentals and look at the fact that, you know, we do have pretty weak demand. It is quite usual to have weak demand at this point of the year, but it is fairly weak in many markets, not a lot of physical buying of copper. But I think that's been exacerbated by funds, many macro funds who've seen China slowing and concerns about growth globally, and they've been expressing that view by shorting copper. This isn't a huge market, and when you get that weight of selling, you clearly get a response in the price.
Now, are these funds correct in their view that demand from China is really taking a sudden drop, or is it more of a seasonal weakness before Chinese New Year?
Again, we've seen Chinese demand slowing generally over the last few years, and there are concerns going forward about Chinese demand, and we've seen it particularly in metals markets in China, not least because of credit tightness. And that really goes back to issues with the warehouse fraud last summer and banks getting much more wary of lending to metals companies in China. But we think this is really temporary. It has caused a temporary destock, and lower prices cause people to destock. But we don't think this is something that is structural or going to continue for many years.
But obviously, as we can see from our second chart, China's growth is obviously not going to go back to the days of over 10% growth. Fixed asset investment is not going to be like it was. What does this mean for copper, do you think? Will consumer goods take up the slack?
Well, clearly we've obviously had a downturn in the property market, which a lot of people are concerned with, and there's a lot of argument about the amount of copper consumed in construction. The fact is, it is a reasonable amount, it is quite significant, but there is also significant amounts of copper used in building out electricity grids, where growth is happening this year after a very weak year. Last year, the Chinese government has put a lot more money about building out electricity grids. So whilst weakness in residential property is a drag on growth, we still see copper demand growing in China. It's used a lot in consumer durables, in infrastructure and other areas, and, you know, cars, everything. So it is used in many applications, and you can't say one application dominates. And
what do you see for the rest of this year? I mean, when will the copper market pick up? Will that come from further supply disruptions, or will it be a demand-driven thing?
I think we're seeing a combination of both. We've actually had quite a few supply disruptions or changes to forecast of supply over the last couple of months, and that certainly has brought down people's view of the surplus this year. And in fact, I would say after the first quarter, this market might well be moving back into deficit. But I think for the market to really move upwards, we do need to see an improvement in Chinese physical demand. Normally, seasonally, we'll see that post the Chinese New Year, and one would expect to see some sign of that. The question is really how strong that is, and I think one concern is the credit tightness there, specifically around the metals industry, might just lead to that taking a little bit longer. But I would certainly believe by the second half of the year we should see good demand growth, not least because growth generally, I think, will be picking up due to the lower oil price and the stimulus from that.
Well, thank you very much, George, for coming in and sharing your views. Clearly an exciting year ahead for copper prices, and Chinese demand, whether it picks up after the Chinese New Year, will be central to what happens to the price of copper for the rest of this year. So clearly something to watch in the commodities markets.